Good evening. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District for October 14th. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belleville. Here. Benford. Here. Fuqua.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to remind all who are either listening or who are here in the audience today about the mission of the Boulder Valley School District, which is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. And as we keep that in mind as we go through our agenda today. The first item on our agenda today is the superintendent's report. Bruce?
Good evening, President Albright, members of the board. Welcome. It's great to have everyone here this evening. I have a few items I'd like to update you on, and of course, I'd be glad to elaborate on any of these with further questions or additional items to your liking. So first of all, the Educational Facility Master Plan work and the upcoming election. On 3A, the bond issue question that's before our community around supporting our school facilities. As you probably know, the ballots were mailed or being mailed this week and should arrive in homes to be voted on. Just a few things going on. We continue to, upon request, provide presentations to parent organizations, other organizations, really anyone who would listen. We share information about the Educational Facility Master Plan, and they seem to be highly interested and very supportive, and we know they want us to come and continue to present. So we've been doing a lot of that, meaning our staff, our school administrators, our teachers and employees, and also members of our community that are proactively working to inform our community around the facility master plan. So all good news on that front. Last Friday, we sent out a reminder to vote flyer to all of our students, to every household, plus in our elementary schools, a flyer in their Friday packet, so that the families will be reminded that the ballots were on their way and that to participate in the electoral process. And then I drafted a letter to all of our employees and our parent community, and I sent you a copy of that last evening electronically, just again reminding folks not only that the election's upon us, but also where they can go to find information about the facility master plan. Each of our 3 counties that we serve, the county clerk's office, really just trying to make sure they have adequate information for the upcoming election. So again, received positive response to that communique as well. We are enjoying some nice endorsements around 3A from city councils, organizations throughout our communities, and again, the campaign committee that's been formed in the community has been working actively around that. So the campaign committee on 3A ran an endorsement ad last Sunday. I think there'll be additional ads that you'll see both in electronic medium as well as print medium. So again, lots of folks working outside supporting BVSD, which is great. And this Sunday, as our understanding, is that the Camera newspaper will run a feature piece on the facility master plan and help provide additional information to the community about the nature of the plan and what's included in it, and et cetera. So we hope and believe it will be very informative going forward. So, because one of our challenges is, we know a large part of our population aren't in parent organizations and aren't in our schools, because we have a lot of citizens who support our schools who don't have children in our schools. So that newspaper article we think will be helpful. Also, I just want to give you a quick update on the board retreat. We continue to, we've solicited a couple additional proposals from a couple facilitators. Deirdre and I have taken lead with that. We've had some conversation with board leadership about it. So our plan will be that once we narrow this down to, we think, a couple folks that we think might be a good match for our needs, we'll get that out to all of you, and then we'll continue to work to secure a date that works for your calendar as well as our facilitators. So I just want you to know we've not lost track of that despite all the other things going on. We're still working on it, and actually we've gotten some good proposals. Then I'd like to move to my final topic, and that's the Colorado Measure of Academic Success, which is the new state assessment program. It's referred to, another acronym, of course, CMAS, Colorado Measurement of Academic Success. It will be the new frontier for student assessment for the state of Colorado. And so a couple of things about that. One is that there are science and social studies assessment developed by Pearson which is a company that developed that under contract from Colorado Department of Education. And then the PARC assessment, which is the reading, writing, and mathematics. So that's the multi-state consortium. So the Science and Social Studies is not the multi-state consortium. That was developed on contract by Pearson Company for Colorado. The PARC is the reading, writing, and mathematics, and that's the multi-state consortium of which Colorado is a member. So all of it's under the tent of CMAS. And so one of the notable changes is what's coming up right away in the next month, and that's around a student assessment for all students in the state of Colorado who are seniors in high school. This is not a typical time we would assess students, but it is what we're going to under the new testing protocol. And so every senior level student will be required to take a battery of science assessments and social studies assessments. These are 3 subtests in each of those 2 areas, so a total of 6, 3 in science and 3 in social studies. Timing for the time allotment for each of those is 70 minutes for each of the subtests, so 210 minutes. So about a half a day of to administer these student assessments. The student assessments are online, so they will need to have an appropriate device, of which will be district issued, because the operating system on the device has to be such that it can interface with our server where the assessments have been downloaded to, and they'll need to use their passwords to get to their appropriate assessment. So there's security built into this, so you can't just walk into the school with your iPad or your PC and log on and take the test, at least not now. Right now, it has to be a district-issued device. So that's been one of our challenges, actually, is because we do not have an adequate number of devices for students in each of our high school settings. And so part of what will need to occur in these arrangements have been made that we'll borrow from other school sites devices, mostly Chromebooks. You've heard a lot about Chromebooks, so they're our less expensive devices that we use in our environment right now. We have thousands of them, but we'll borrow them from neighboring school sites so that on the assessment dates, they will, in each of our schools, have adequate equipment. So they'll use their labs, they'll use all the devices they have, and then we'll use whatever additional devices. So some schools can do it fine, and some of our larger schools especially will need to bring devices into those. So that's just the logistics we're working through. Our IT department, is making sure that the tests are loaded on the servers and that we have refreshed and enhanced wireless on all of our campuses now. We have a good bandwidth going to our campuses. So if we have the right number of devices that every student will test online simultaneously, then this should work. And so our challenge, one of our challenges, there are several, one of our challenges is that in our large high schools, not only do we not have enough devices, but to actually have all 500 plus students in our largest high schools online taking the assessment, what we're going to need to do is have the testing periods be just for those students. And so our largest high schools would dismiss all other students when these assessments will be administered. So like we do when we administer the junior level ACT, and it's just the juniors are on the campus, that'll be true for our large high schools when the seniors take this assessment. So there'll be basically 2 half days. We've designated the days that we think are have the least number of conflicts with other things going on, that we will administer these assessments at that time. So communication will go to parents so they know who will be in school and who won't be and what's going to happen during those days, just like we do when we do other test administration. That's the work that's gone on. I mean, we have to actually make sure every device is ready and able to assess, and then they'll do these online assessments, and it will go into the server, and then it'll generate data around their performance going forward. This first year for the Science and Social Studies assessment, the CMAS, what matters is participation. So when they look at accreditation, the expectation is that 95% of our students will participate or more, will participate in this assessment. So obviously it will be our obligation to create the appropriate test setting, have the right devices, have it ready, and then encourage our students to attend, to take the assessment. So, but it is the percentage of participation. Second year, how they actually perform on the assessment will also be included in our accountability and accreditation, but this being the first year, just participation. So why don't I pause there? I want to also comment on the Science and Social Studies assessments that our students took last spring in elementary and middle school, but that's those reports are about to come out, and I want to talk to you about that. But let me just pause on the senior level science and social studies assessment that I described to see if there's questions of information that you were interested in that I didn't comment. Then I come back to that last piece, if I could, Laurie.
Thank you. That was a lot of information.
That's a lot of
I'm sure
information.
we'll have a few questions.
Okay.
So let's just start here with Jenny. Go ahead, please.
So when do we get results back from the CMAS, and is there anything, I mean, what are we going to do with those results?
Yeah.
I mean, even though they're not counting towards our accreditation, do we
Right.
think
So
it'll be-
the assessment that our students in the elementary and middle school, they took this assessment in the spring, and we just, those are going to be publicly released this Friday. So that time, now of course, summer was in there. So, I would say several months probably, but I don't know that exactly, what the turnaround is. But part of what's happening, being that this is the first administration for all these tests, they're all on a slower, more relaxed timeline, just because there's a lot of first-time work to be done, from administering them to getting the data and analyzing data. So the idea is in the future that it would be more instantaneous, that it would be quicker, but I don't think we'll see a quick turnaround necessarily this first year or two. But that's the idea of the online assessment.
So by the time we get so this year's results are actually not going to be very useful for anybody, including
I would agree. Not particularly useful for science educators or students, probably either one. Yeah, I mean, our hope would be that in time it would be, but I think there's some question about the utility of a assessment in the 7th semester of the senior year in general around instruction, but that's been debated thoroughly in front of the State Board of Education, and they get to decide.
Not
So,
the issue before us.
Not
right
the
now.
issue tonight, yeah. But it's a question that we've been talking about.
Tina.
Is that pretty typical in other districts that people are just having one dismissing other students for half days? Is that sort of what you're hearing from other?
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that very complete, Tina. We actually did contact the Deputy Commissioner, Keith Owen, several weeks ago when we were working on this, and I said, so Keith, this is a challenge for us. Let me talk to you about what we're working on right now. So I kind of went through this whole thing with him, and I said, we're a little worried about this. And I said, are there other models or other examples from large high schools like ours? And so they really didn't have that information at CDE, and so we've been communicating some with them. I think everybody's just trying to figure it out this first year, Tina, and we'll probably learn some things from it, and we'll probably learn from others. I mean, there probably are high school settings where they have an adequate number of devices that they can, part of our issue isn't just the number of devices. Part of it is test setting. So maybe in the old days we could have just put tables in the gymnasium and had students line up and take a paper pencil test, but that won't work in our wireless environment under our present configuration. So we actually have to have these devices that we have, like in a meeting room here, would take up to 30 or 35 devices. So if we concentrate them in areas, then the system will fail. So, there might be other settings where they have a different kind of capacity that would give them more flexibility. But we'll learn from this. And Andrew Moore and Jonathan and our staff that are working on this, working with their colleagues around the state. So, this is first year, and we'll figure it out. So, our preference would be not to do the release, but right now that's really our only choice.
And just another question, have you heard from anyone in higher education about using these scores for equivalent credits, or how that information might be relayed to those institutions?
So I've certainly been involved in discussion at the state level and meetings where there's interest in appealing to higher ed to give value to these assessment results so that students would be more motivated to participate in the assessments and maybe try harder, because if they don't have utility for their last semester of high school or transition to college, some might not think they have great utility. And so I know there's conversation going on, but that'll be probably Colorado institutions looking at that, and then out-of-state institutions would be yet another discussion. The PARC assessment, where it's a multi-state consortium, might have more clout in this discussion than a state-based test like this science and social studies. But I think we're on the front end of that conversation, and I would hate to predict where it'll wind up. But I think that's the interest, is to give it greater utility for transition into college and career.
So I'd like to just follow up on that question. So a lot of high school students will apply for college and be accepted in their first semester before they even have the results.
Maybe.
So it's a timing thing that
Yeah.
they'll be accepted before the results are available. If we're thinking it could be a 2 to 4 month
Yeah, I
period.
think in the
it's just
future it's to be shorter.
a
But
comment that the timing is very awkward on this in my judgment. So, which I'm sure has been discussed at length, but,
At length.
but it's hard to motivate kids who are already accepted to college and are already on their way. But anyway, other questions? Sam?
So the seniors aren't doing any special preparation for these social and science tests, are they?
Not that I'm aware of, Sam. I mean, partly is it's all so new to
Yeah.
all of us, both the interface with I mean, I'm not saying there's not any, but I mean, obviously we're sticking with our curriculum, of course, but we'll learn a lot from this, just like we did. So we did pilot some of these assessments in the last 2 years, and they've gone through modification since then, but we didn't require all schools to but some of our schools. So we've gained some information. Our directors of curriculum have gained some information about the assessments. But the reality is I did an interview this afternoon with Amy on the elementary assessment, which I'll talk about in a minute. I mean, we figure we're on the beginning of a multi-year journey with this, of understanding the assessments, the administration of the assessments, the use of the data that's meaningful to students as well as the system, but it's going to take some time because it's all new.
Yeah, but given the sort of year-to-year subject focus within
Yeah.
those two, a senior may be asked, for example, a biology question. They had biology in 9th or 10th grade.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's intended to be kind of a capstone assessment is what this senior level assessment is. But you're right, depending on when they took the course of study or how they did it, they're going to be in a really different place. Now, the mathematics assessment that will be administered in the spring is actually aligned with the course of study, so around the different levels of mathematics. So it's actually a little bit different than this capstone assessment, so which has its own set of challenges to administer as well.
Okay. Okay, Jenny?
Oh, this is just a real quick follow-up, because I know one of the things that I believe was in the CASB legislative resolutions and that we've discussed as school board statewide is that these tests, is switching the test to end of course. And I don't think we've gotten there, have we yet, Bruce? Switching the test that we give to high school students to be end of course assessments rather than end of year assessments, because of the way that high school students may progress through a curriculum somewhat differently than they do generally K through 8. So you could be taking different levels of mathematics or different levels of science courses. And so there's been some discussion about that, and I think that's a piece in the CASB legislative platform.
And we'll see that
yeah.
in mathematics with the park, for example. That will be more like what you're describing.
So they will be doing
Yeah,
the end of
as
course?
opposed to the science, which we're seeing different than that, so.
Because I'm just, yes.
Tom, do you have a question? No? Shelley? Okay.
So you said this year is participation rate only?
That's my understanding.
That's what
yeah.
they're measuring? So is that that's for CMAS and for Park, the first year around?
The CMAS is, I think the park, we'll use it for accountability. They'll begin to do accountability measures, but I think for the CMAS, the science and social studies, I'll need to check on that for sure, Shelley. But, I mean, participation doesn't go away. Participation's always there. The question is, will the data be used in the reading and writing and mathematics for other purposes around accountability? I think mostly it's a pass year for state accountability purposes. Now, for schools that are in an improvement mode and they have 5 years to get to a different place, this actually, and that is only one of our schools, but one of our alternative schools. But for the others, it does count as a year towards the 5. So it's not a meaningless year in that regard. But as far as schools in good standing, it will be the participation rate that will be considered in that general accountability measure. And then the growth scores are being looked at, and so there's future decisions to be made around how the data will be used going forward, but for this year's participation.
And without 95% participation, we're in danger of losing accreditation? Is that-
Well, I think it's more of a notation on that. We've received a letter from the U.S. Department, through CDA, U.S. Department of Education letter, which I shared with you. So I think they're worried about non-participation. What we've been informed is that if we make effort to have students participate, and we make a good faith effort to do that, and we don't reach that level, that it probably leaves us in better standing than if we simply didn't administer the test or didn't encourage or didn't create opportunities that were conducive to assessment. Then I think our standing would be more impacted negatively.
So speaking of that letter, which was rather harsh, I thought, I'm not quite sure why Colorado is being held to a different standard than some other states. Do you understand that? Because other states have gotten waivers for one reason or another.
I do understand that to some degree. We made a commitment when we made application and passed legislation in the state and then applied for a variance around Race to the Top a number of years ago, which we didn't receive the funding. But we made some commitments when we did that as a state, and it was a part of this variance request we got from the U.S. Department of Education. So there was a recent article in the Seattle Times about Washington State, who was in a similar situation, and they didn't honor their commitment like Colorado's trying to, and they actually reverted back to the original No Child Left Behind legislation, which requires all students to be proficient. So they're really in a difficult place with the U.S. Department of Education and state accountability, because they actually tried to walk it backwards. So, you know, it plays out a little bit different depending on the commitments that states have made with regard to both the original Race to the Top applications and also the variance that we subsequently submitted to the U.S. Department of Education. So that's what binds us right now.
So when we submitted that variance, I assume we got Race to the Top funds.
We did not.
We did not, as a result of the variance?
No.
That
No.
was the waiver from No Child Left Behind.
Correct. It was a waiver from No Child Left Behind. The commitment around the change in legislation back in 2010-11 was around, so, you know, where performance had to be included in the teacher evaluation, so that was Senate Bill 191. So all of those key pieces of legislation that were passed by the legislature as a part of preparing to make application for Race to the Top. Now, could the state have gone back and reversed all those? Yes, they could have. They didn't, but they could have. But they did it, my understanding is they did it to enhance our opportunity to compete for those funds, and then ultimately we did not get them.
I thought we did get a small amount.
We did get some Race to the Top funds for early childhood.
Okay,
So
that was
our, yes, but the big multi-million dollars, 75 million, I think, or 100 million that we were competing for in 2010 was not funded. But we have received some subsequent funds, kind of under a different pathway.
And I don't suppose they considered unwinding anything because they didn't get the money.
No, I don't know. Maybe they considered it, but they haven't done it. So, because, you know, they've lobbied pretty hard to get those bills passed.
So there's no provision at all for taking this with paper and pencil?
Not this particular assessment, there's not, Shelley, unless it's students who need altered conditions because of their unique learning needs, then we have some provisions. That's a small percentage. We actually, as we look at Park, we are looking at, there is an option available in Park in the spring that we could administer some of it paper pencil for a year. And then our understanding, it all has to go online. So we're really trying to just get geared up to be able to do it wall to wall, because that's the expectation.
Okay, and then you said we're borrowing computers, right, to do this?
Yes.
So that, I assume that people are then going to be borrowing computers from us?
Well, these are from ourselves, so
Oh,
like,
okay. We're not borrowing from other
no.
districts
So
or, okay,
Casey is gonna send their Chromebooks over to Boulder High, et cetera.
okay.
Can I ask a question about that borrowing of computers? So what does this mean to the middle schools or the elementary schools from which, where we're borrowing these Chromebooks from? I mean,
So on
how
the
does that
days-
affect them?
Well, on the days that they're at the other school, obviously they won't have access to them, so, I mean,
And so
we've
how many
moved-
days is that? I'm assuming you're going to take a day or two to get them over there, get them set up, test them, load the stuff, you know, massive operation. You've got, you know,
All
trucks.
hands on deck,
I'm picturing, yeah, you're going to be loading some of those
Or we're gonna do
out there with your
hands on
little.
and our gloves.
Yeah, I'll be out there.
So
Yeah, we'll-
Thursday, Friday of a given
What
week
does
is our
this mean?
plan to test, and so, you know, I guess our hope would be that it might be 3 days that those devices would not be available in the setting they're being borrowed from, and then we get them back over the weekend.
So a day before the test, a day of the test, and then
Well, 2 days for the test. It takes 2 days.
2 days
half
for the
days.
test, and then we're going to ship them home that night?
Take them home on the weekend, yes, probably.
Pardon?
Take them back on the weekend, so they'd be ready in the schools by Monday.
Oh, okay. That is all hands on deck. That's an expense.
Well, it is, and I mean, it takes people away from other work, for sure. I mean, we probably won't expand staff, we'll just use our staff in different ways.
Make sure they get in the right room.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Back-
I
I
mean,
mean,
they're working
returned.
on all those logistics right now.
I'm just imagining, I'm just curious about how much
Yeah,
it
it's
might cost.
Yeah,
to
it's a logistics
staff.
issue, yeah, staff time, for sure.
So
Okay.
you said that we picked the 2.5 days that we're going to do this?
We have targeted 2 days that we think will be the least disruptive for other things that are going on, yeah.
Okay, so that means these tests are not being taken simultaneously around the state?
No, we have a testing window from November 3rd to the 21st that we have to administer them and do the makeup somewhere in that window. So we're
They're
gonna,
not
we're gonna pick the
concerned
midpoint.
They're not concerned about test security or?
You know, they have a lot of provisions around the items and things, and so part of that is we have to, you know, how we administer them. That is, there are rules around that, yes, but, yeah.
Okay, so what kind of data is being generated and who has access to it?
From the tests themselves? So these will be, assessment measures. This one we're talking about on science and social studies. So once the reports are, once it's completed and scored, then it'll come back to schools and by student, by school, by district, and across. And so it'll go on, school view, just like our other test scores would. So it'll be comparable to what we did with CMAS and TCAP.
And who else will have access to it?
All the public will have access. I mean, not the individual student scores, of course, but,
Right.
Group scores and school scores and district scores, just like,
And the state will have access?
yes, it will.
And what about any third-party contractors?
So there's a security agreement, through Park and CMAS with Pearson that, with the understanding of, like, we've looked at those, that these won't be, the personal data won't be, marketed or misused in other ways. But I think that's an ongoing discussion with the State Board of Education about storage of the data, access to the data, use of the data. I think it's an ongoing discussion. I think that's why there was some privacy legislation in the last session. I'm going to guess there might well be again in this session. So,
Wouldn't it be good to nail down that discussion before we take the test?
yeah, I think there's confidence, Shelley, that appropriate safeguards have been taken for any misuse or privatization use of the data. I think there is always some risk when you store data like this that it could be, hacked into or used in different ways. But as far as the relationship with the vendors and their opening it up to other parties, I think is secure. I mean, those provisions have been made through the State Board of Education, the Colorado Department of Education. So as we've looked at our own work around that with iReady and with Enrich, our management software, I think, we looked at those security agreements, and I think we're confident, assuming that they're not hacked into, that they are secure and won't be used or misused in a way that we aren't supporting. And I'm confident that'd be true of the Pearson. I mean, this is a large testing company that has their reputation at stake here. And then the Park Consortium has its own administration and entity, their own staff that do the same. So I'm pretty confident in that. I think just, going forward, we just need to continue to watch that.
Is there some link to that privacy agreement that we could look at?
I'm sure we could find that, Shelley. I have not personally looked at it, but we could follow up. Melissa, maybe we could work with Jonathan, Bridget. I'm sure we can find what they have. It would be both with Pearson and with the Park administration, I would say.
Right. And then just one last question. So the elementary and middle school kids took this last spring?
Yes.
And we're just getting the results now?
Yeah, they'll be publicly released on Friday.
And we're saying they're not useful to anyone, meaning they're not useful to last year's teachers who,
Well, right, because they
Administer
don't have
the
the
test.
students anymore.
but as group data, is it useful?
I'll just go there because that was actually my last point I was going to mention on the CMAS testing. So just to remind, we did this assessment in the middle school and elementary in the spring for the targeted grade levels in science and social studies. So that's the spring administration. The seniors are for fall. So what I shared in the interview today is that we don't have any comparative data, so we don't know if that group of fourth graders did better than they would have done last year because they didn't take the test last year. So our work really will be is to look at the nature of the test, the results, how does it relate to our work we've been doing around content standards and curriculum and our instructional materials, and do we see patterns around do some of our subpopulations of students do better or worse, and if so, is it language dependence? What is what do we have going on? Then after we have a second year of data, we'll have some comparative data. If we have other measures, even in classroom measures, that you can do some face validity checks on assessments. So if you took your students in a science class and said, given this assessment, I think I know where the upper quartile of students would be in the second and the third and the fourth, and then look at your data from the test and say, yeah, that pretty well lines up with what I see day to day in science education, or say, that doesn't look at all what I look at. The students I thought would perform best on this curriculum aligned with the standards is not. So, I mean, that's internal work that we can do, but until we really have some multi-year data and have some comparative analysis, it'll be difficult for us to. Now, what we know from the data we've seen, which will be released publicly, BVSD tended to do better on these assessments in the spring than the state did overall, which is consistent with what we generally do in assessment. So that pattern is consistent, but we will do a deeper analysis of our own. So programmatically, yes, I think it will have some value early on as we look at our own curriculum and instruction. Value to parents, value to students. I think that we'll just have to see. If you're not using it embedded as a part of instruction, generally, I think it has less utility. I mean, these are state accountability measures. These are not formative assessments to assist us with day-to-day instruction. That's a different purpose.
Just had one other thought. As I recall from the Race to the Top eligibility requirements from that grant, I think it says under data access somewhere in there that schools that get Race to the Top money need to provide data for researchers who want to go in and design curriculum that's.
Right.
So since we got preschool money, are we therefore required to submit to that clause of the grant?
I'm going to need to check on that, Shelley. I don't know the answer to that. The other discussion we've been in is this data pipeline that the state has created that will take data from school districts to the Colorado Department of Education. Part of that is the result of a multi-million-dollar grant that CDE, Colorado Department of Education, received through the U.S. Department of Education. So generally, what you said is accurate in that there is an ongoing interest by the U.S. Department of Education to look at these assessment results over time and look at subpopulations to see if there are curriculums or instruction that is most helpful from early childhood to science education to try to, as a part of a research base. So, but I don't know what exactly our state's commitment is under the No Child Left Behind funding they've received and these new tests. I mean, I just don't know the answer to that. So
I
we
think
can
that would be good to know.
check back through
Yeah.
the CD and see what we can find out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Can I make a comment to fellow board members?
Sure, please.
So, because I want to follow up on something Tina said, which is about the use of test results for higher education, and just urge our board to think about how that might play out. Because I know that in our legislative platform, we're opposed to exit exams for high school, and this is not using state assessments for admission requirements to colleges and universities isn't exactly the same thing. But I hope we'll follow very carefully how that's used, because it raises like alarm bells for me when I hear about colleges using those tests in that way, because I'm not sure. I mean, I understand, and it further raises alarm bells when I hear schools encouraging colleges to do that so that kids have some skin in the game, because that's a discussion about how those tests are good for schools, but it's not a discussion about how those tests are good for kids. And if it would benefit kids for colleges and universities to use those results under some circumstances, or for us to be able to use them to excuse kids from some requirements, class seat time requirements, I'd be okay with that. But I think we have to be really careful and watch how they're used, because it just makes me really nervous. And another thing I'd comment is another reason it makes me nervous is because these tests are designed to assess school systems. They're not designed to be college. I mean, they're not designed to carry that kind of weight, and I'm not aware that they're designed to carry that kind of weight, and so I just think as a board we need to watch that and pay very close attention to the state conversations around that.
And the state conversations being maybe with legislators or maybe with the State Board of Education. So it might be interesting for us to report back what we found here in our experience, like what the troubles were. I mean, not troubles, but what the challenges are about dealing with these Chromebooks. I mean, one thing I was thinking about these Chromebooks is that students are be taking a test on a device that they've never seen before. If they typically work on a laptop or a different kind of a computer, and now they're working on something else that they're not familiar with. I mean, it can kind of glitch up their effort because it's the first time they've ever seen it. I just think it would be really important to record really carefully what happens in this. I mean, what the challenges are, what the extra expenses are, and then let our legislators know. We'll be seeing them shortly after that, I think, or maybe, I don't know, around the same time that we have that experience. But people need to understand, and they should, it also would be really interesting, I think, to have some people making these rules about, as you call them, seventh semester high school students, what their frame of mind is at that point and what we're asking them to do. And then I pointed out a lot of kids have already been accepted to college at that point. So it becomes they're not quite as motivated. And I think, you can set rules at the state, but whether they're practical in a sense. That's what worries me a little bit. I had one question. So what's our typical attendance rate for seniors in November, or our high school kids in general? What's our,
High.
I mean, is it like 5% absent with illness? November, flu season? I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to get to 95%.
Well, they can do makeup tests.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we generally test over 95%. I mean, almost always 95%. I mean, we seldom have attendance, test participation percentage issues. We almost without exception, always meet or exceed the standard because of the good work of our staff. I mean, they when they're back, they give them the test. So, yeah, that's, I mean, so, but our absence, attendance rate would be well above 95% generally as well. So, I mean, we have high attendance, and our students are serious about being in school. And I mean, if they're sick, they need to stay home, obviously. But if they are ill when we administer the test, we'll do makeups and
Okay.
do our best.
Yeah. Okay. Tom?
So let me follow up on something that you said. I think it would be good for us to capture the cost of this test. And not only manpower, but also in whatever we can in terms of lost opportunities. Because obviously we're having to use these devices in other places than they were
Right.
intended for. So there's going to be some loss in efficiency.
Yeah.
But when we talk to the legislatures, I'd like to be able to say, hey, this is how many thousands of dollars this cost us to administer this test, plus the disruption in our classrooms where we had to pull these devices out,
yeah.
and the disruptions in our staff that could have been doing other things that are more
Yeah.
in line to our educational plan.
Yeah.
So if we can get our handle around that, to have some data when we have that discussion with legislators, we'll have something,
Yeah.
Substantial to talk to, rather than conjecture, right?
Yeah, we probably, yes, we can do that, Tom, and I think we can at least get some broad brush on it. I think that, then there's the spring assessment, which we probably don't fully appreciate. I mean, we know how long the tests take and when the students will be taking the assessment, but I think until we get through one cycle of this, it's going to be a little harder for us to capture, because we just haven't built all the schedules and things yet, because part of the challenge is with all the online assessments is that for really weeks, the devices won't be available because they'll be used to, so it might be just the third grade this week, but then the fourth grade next week, and you have multiple subtests, and so you wind up, so we can logistically do it, it ties up not only the instructional time while they're taking the test, but the devices are offline when somebody else is taking it, right? And then it also kind of disrupts the school schedule, so, we have to kind of work around all those. So, but we can certainly try to get our head around what we know so far and describe that. And then I think we've been collecting information on this really for over a year. We did actually a survey with staff last spring, even before we implemented all these, just to get some feedback on the spring CMAS test and other assessments we've done. But we'll do that again so we can at least get some descriptive information, and we'll try to get some quantitative description as well.
Shelley?
So I know in our legislative platform that we have a preference for kids who opt out not impacting our schools. Has there been more discussion about that in terms of the CMAS and the park?
As far as from the state level or locally?
Yeah.
I think it's a part of the discussion that's before the House Bill 1202 task force. It's one of the issues, and they're still in process. My guess is, given what I've read and heard, is that it will be some form of recommendation that will come out of the 1202 task force as to the opt-out provision and the consequences or not around that. I mean, but it's still in process right now.
Tina, did CASB have a discussion about that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
we talked about the opt-out clause, and Shelley, it was interesting because several districts stood up and expressed a concern that schools will encourage certain populations to not come to school that day and be tested. And I was surprised how many districts came up with that. So it was an interesting, but a lot of people talked about how they wanted the ability to opt out. And I think at the end they took a position that there should be an ability to opt out, and the language should be in the CASB update with the platform. So I think it went through. But yeah, there was a fear. They felt that there would be schools encouraging certain kids not to come to school that day.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
Interesting discussion. Thank you for your report. And I think we've heard some really interesting concerns raised about what it means for our kids and what it means for the operation of our schools, cost issues. So it'd be good to hear what the senior high school staff thinks about this after it's all over, these tests in the fall. And I think it would be really instructive in terms of dealing with our legislators so that they understand what the effect is. Okay, the next item on our agenda is our DAC report from the District Accountability. And Laura is making her way to the podium. Thank you. Thank you for wading through this discussion that we've been having, but we're very glad to have you here to talk with us about the Accountability Committee is doing.
It's a pleasure. I want you guys to know that my kids are outside behind the wall there, so I will not be able to stay for a whole lot longer. So thanks for your patience. So I wanted to give you guys an update on what the DAC has been up to and give you guys a sense of the iteration and coupling that we'd like to establish for this coming year with you guys so that we can work more closely together than we have in recent years regarding our projects and opportunities to provide review and insights from a parent community through the District Accountability Committee. I'd like to thank Tom and Shelley, who have been very committed to this close coupling, and they have attended our executive meetings, and they have, of course, been attending our regular general meetings. So we started out with a significant number of new members this year, more than we had last year as far as new membership goes. I am the membership chair, and I'm going to be prioritizing filling out our ranks in a higher number than we've had for a long time. And as we've introduced our new members, we've started out with rules and obligations that we have as a District Accountability Committee. We've walked everybody through the strategic plan on a couple of occasions now, and we've introduced everyone to our Colorado academic content and standards so that we can help develop this committee and their understanding of the accountability that we have here within our district. As part of our development of our work ahead for this coming year, we have put together a list of activities that are a combination of recommendations that Tom and Shelley have introduced to us, as well as work that we as a District Accountability Committee start as sort of our baseline for what we plan to do in the year ahead. So along that note, our starting point, the very first item that our exec team put together was a goal of reviewing some of our strategic plan action plans. And we'll have to look at the schedule of how those roll out regarding whether or not we're able to target the ones that were of most interest. We surveyed our District Accountability Committee general membership to try to get a sense of where our top 5 or our top focus areas of interest were. And in the order of a very informal vote, the areas of highest interest were the multi-tiered systems of support, healthy, safe, and equitable learning environment was the second. We had a tie for third between parent and family partnerships and the professional development of licensed staff. And the fifth one on our list was effectiveness in learning. So these were some of the interest areas of all of the focus areas that we have in our strategic plan. So we'd love to be able to participate in reviewing these action plans, providing feedback regarding their accountability, their measures, and any other the broad statements that they make. Other items, of course, are budget and improvement plan reviews. Budget is, typically a challenge as we try to figure out the right or the best time for us to insert our feedback and the flavor of feedback to provide, how to iterate with our school accountability committee. So we'll be looking to the Board of Education for guidance on when the best insertion points are for budget. A couple of special topics that have come up in discussing with Tom and Shelley. We understand that there is a privacy policy in work. And we would very much enjoy an opportunity to review a draft of that, provide some feedback. If we are given some planning time in advance, we will be able to also look for opportunities to reach into the school accountability committees for some of those group notes, if that's what we want to do. We also had some topics brought up regarding class size. There's topics on assessments and their effectiveness. Those are very broad in those two categories. So what we'd like to do as of tonight is start this conversation with the Board of Education regarding these topics, see if we can refine, get a little bit of buy-in from your side, and then the District Accountability Executive Team will treat this as sort of a holding bin of recommendations and work that you guys would like for us to do. We'll look at our planning queue for the entire year. We do have a calendar that we've set up thanks to Tina's vision a couple of years ago, and we've maintained that. So we are able to look ahead, figure out when we want to tackle topics, how we want to tackle them, where we want to reach back to SAC representation and provide that time to iterate. So and at this point, I will stop talking and see if you guys have some feedback for us regarding work you'd like for us to achieve. Tina.
Yeah, thank you so much for being patient.
Oh, it's my
feel
pleasure.
badly the night that you came. We went until 7 o'clock with the report, and so
It's
I
okay.
never heard your kids. I think
They're
they're
watching,
perfect.
I think, a Jeff Corwin experience.
So thank you so much, and I just the first thing I want to know is what is the last item that you were interested in as a group? I caught the first.
You mean of the strategic plan
Yes.
items, effectiveness and learning?
Effectiveness in learning. Okay.
Yes. Now, that doesn't mean that we're solid committed. We just wanted to survey the interest level.
Yeah, no, I just couldn't hear it.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I just personally am just so interested in hearing DAC's feedback on the strategic plan, and my assumption is that you'll be a part of that.
We
so,
are
but we haven't
looking
discussed it as a board.
very actively to lock and load and engage on these action plans. It is at the top of our radar.
Good. Comments, board members? Any comments? Sam?
Yeah, I just echo Tina, I think you're right on to make that your top priority. I'm very interested in
you.
DAC's opinion on those.
Great. Well, with
Aspects
Chuck
of the spend
Figure
plan.
at our head this year, there was no other path.
Great.
He's been a wonderful leader and contributor there.
And thank you again for all your work.
No problem.
What else? Shelley?
I want to thank you too, Laura, and to see the number of new members at the last DAC meeting was pretty impressive.
Very
So
happy
I think
about
your
that.
recruiting efforts are paying off, and
Well,
thank you
Ron
very much for that.
has been very closely coupled. I'd like to thank Ron Cabrera for his help. Every time I say I would like to see a school from this area, he contacts the principal, we start moving
Great.
on it. My latest request as the membership chair was to ensure we get Title I school representation as much as possible.
Right. Well, thanks to Ron too, then, it was just great to see all those new faces at the last meeting.
It is.
Yeah. So I just made a few notes here about things that I would like, the board to think about asking DAC to look at. And for sure, the strategic plan is one of them. But I guess what I would request is that, you not just look at the action design recommendations, in a vacuum, that you would look at just in general whether all of the 17 design teams are, if their initiatives are bold enough, if they actually address our vision.
Yes.
I'm sure they're all great recommendations, but will they help make that vision come true and that mission? And it may be that they've missed some things, it may not be, but it would be nice to look at them as a whole and see if there are any gaps as far as DAC is concerned. And of course, since you're an accountability committee, are they going to have the desired impact on student achievement goals that we would like to see? And what might be some additional recommendations that DAC might make in addition to what the design teams have come forward with? So I guess what I'm saying is it would be nice if the board gave DAC the charge to look very broadly at what's being presented for the strategic plan.
I envision that for each of the areas we look, that we would be able to generate a report that covers these types of topics, and we will, without a doubt, formulate an outline that we can consistently apply as we review things topically. We'll have different outcomes for different action plans. Each action plan will be unique in its own way, but we will certainly formulate something that addresses these topics you've brought up. I think those are excellent bullet points.
And I can send you these notes too, so you don't
Thank
have
you.
to write it all down. The other thing that, I am interested in knowing is whether we're going to have an adequate system for monitoring, for continuously monitoring the performance of the plan. So I know that the district's going to come forward with some measurements that, will help guide the action teams and the action plans, but I'd just like DAC to take a look at that too, to see if we feel like that's adequate for continuous monitoring. And then I know that you mentioned the budget. So the district's going to be bringing forward some spending priorities that come out of the strategic plan, and also some other expenses that are just general operating expenses. And they're going to come to us with a list of priorities. And then I just want DAC to add their priorities in as well, like you do every year in the budget, by going to the SACs and asking them, what they would like to see as spending priorities, so that we can fold those into what the district's bringing forward from the strategic plan. Because there may be some that don't overlap. I don't know.
When will the strategic planning groups be presenting their priorities to the budget? Do you have that formulated yet?
Our estimated timeline is January.
January. We'd love to dovetail into that.
And then another thought I had was that I know when the educator effectiveness group was meeting originally, that Isabel was on it, and Isabel was also a DAC member. But Isabel's not here anymore, and I don't know if there's a DAC member on the educator effectiveness team anymore. But I think there's a meeting coming up soon. Yeah, I'm wondering if it might be helpful to have a DAC member just sit in on that, so that they might be able to give us feedback at some point on the assessment measures that we're using to evaluate teachers, and maybe even weigh in on the principal evaluation process, since those are really very much a part of your statutory
Absolutely.
Requirements for DAC. So if we could get Laura the date of that meeting, it's October 21st, right?
We will do our
morning.
best to mobilize.
Maybe you could get somebody there. I know it's kind of late notice, but just to listen in so you
Flexible.
have the background information for maybe looking at that later. And then, I don't know about the rest of the board, but I feel like I'm losing touch a little bit with how the schools are feeling about how things are going. Like how the parents are feeling about their principals and the climate in their schools and their class sizes, their capacity, we've heard some concerns about that. I don't know if they're generalized concerns or very specific concerns about certain schools. It would be really nice to have some sort of more feedback coming up from the schools to the board. So does anybody else feel like they would want that? Just to check in with the schools in some form, some survey or something that would be helpful?
I'll comment just as a board member. I'm not always real crazy about surveys, but I am interested in feedback. And it might be interesting to have a conversation, to hear, or I don't know, to go to school SACs or something. I'm not sure. I think it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure I want to decide today how to do it, but I think it's a really interesting question. I feel like I'm a bit out of touch as well. Particularly when you don't have kids in school, you don't really know what, kind of what the reality is of it. But
So would we want DAC to think about how that could be done? If not a survey, what other way?
I'd be curious about having the board discussion about that. For me, I think it's a level that we should really talk about in terms of what's happening, not so much to ask DAC to do it.
Okay.
So can I ask a question, just generally procedure-wise?
Please, because I was getting ready to do
I
that
think this
too.
conversation, I'm getting a little uncomfortable with this conversation, because I feel like we've always done this, well, yeah, this is not the way we've always done it, and maybe we could change it, but it seems to me like it's more comfortable to do this in a work session, and we've always had a work session with DAC. And that way, because Shelley has some interesting suggestions, but I feel like it might be more helpful to have a DAC executive committee here and have the board be able to, and have something in writing from DAC about what your proposals are, because you've got lots of good ideas, but DAC only has so much capacity, and our staff only has so much capacity to help DAC out. And so I would say that I would really, before, that I wish we would schedule a work session where we could sort of weigh our priorities and look at proposals from DAC about what your interests are, rather than just sort of, this feels like not a very
My
good
understanding
format
is
for
we do
doing
have a
this.
work session planned for November
Yeah,
18th.
we do have a work session
good, thank
scheduled.
you,
So
thank
the
you.
point of this is to throw out these ideas so DAC can start thinking about
Okay,
what's
that's
doable.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Then I'm fine, because I just don't, I just couldn't quite understand where we were.
One of the evolutions that we're attempting to make this year is to get away from the DAC exec team making up projects in a bubble and coming back with these reports that may or may not really be addressing the highest priorities. So by introducing this extra iteration, and you may see us on a very regular basis, we'll be able to give you status updates where something, maybe we're not getting the kind of feedback we wanted to be able to collect, or maybe we're not meeting an expectation, we can ask for redirection. We think of ideas more than once a year. So
And I actually really appreciate you coming and reporting to us about what you're doing. I just felt, so I
the work
appreciate the
session will be
clarification on-
wonderful, and I
on
would
when we're going to
propose
talk, or when
that
the work session
our
is.
DAC exec group can certainly try to formulate some notional ideas on this topic that you've introduced about how we can gather feedback from schools and the SACs regarding certain sentiments and feedback. We'll try to come up with what we think is an appropriate range of work for us to do as just something to start with, put on the table, and then iterate with you guys at the work session.
Okay. And then one more comment, this is a question or request for Shelley, which is, if you send notes to, you were gonna send notes to them, if you would send them to us too, because you have more experience, I mean, you and Tom have clearly had a lot of time to think about at this, and it would help, at least it would help me to think about it in preparation for future meetings if you'd send them to us. And again, thank you for your work, and I'm glad to have you here.
No problem. I did want to ask regarding the privacy policy. I did want to see if I could elicit some feedback on that idea.
Excuse me, can we adjust the microphones at all?
I'm sorry,
having
I'm
a really
speaking
hard time
quietly.
hearing.
Regarding the idea of reviewing the privacy policy that may be formulated in the coming year, do you guys think that that is an appropriate use of DAC's time?
Well, I think we ought to
Policy
probably
review.
start with staff on that. I mean, that's just sort of my judgment on it, is to really try to think about what the law is and what the issues are. I mean, I think you understand them, Bruce, and have looked at them, what the questions are, and maybe formulate some pros and cons about a policy prior to DAC's engagement, is my sense about it. It's a really important issue.
So you have scheduled for your work session in October, that is the topic, and Melissa Barber and Andrew Moore are preparing for that, and Cabinet's been working with them, so I guess that's next week. So I'd invite DAC to join us. They're welcome. It's a public meeting. Listen in. Our normal procedure is that we bring draft policy and time to the board for review, and we take it to DAC at the same time. We take it to the BBA at the same time, so we solicit feedback. And so I would suggest we do the same with this, is that when there's a draft policy, which won't be ready next week is a work session to begin to start just informing and understanding the issues. But we certainly can share that information with DAC. They could make it an agenda item on their own agenda if they'd want. We can share the same information. But when we have a draft policy for your review, I'd recommend that we, as we have before, we take it to DAC for their input. And they may want to do that formally, or come and give comment at the board meeting. So I think if we have the board take lead on the policy adoption, would be our procedure, and get input from DAC along the way.
I think we should just follow normal procedure. I mean, I think that's great. Thanks. So, Laura, please invite one or more people to come and listen in on the discussion and hear the presentation and discussion and concerns, and I think that'd be great. But
Certainly.
it's an interesting issue that we continue to think about.
Perfect.
So,
So that's exactly the kind of insertion point information I was looking for on that topic tonight. Okay, anything else?
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, so that's great. You know, this, end of last year, we proposed with DAC a monthly a meeting like this. We come and have a dialogue, and I think what we've had here tonight is what we intended, so that the board at large would have time and input to what DAC is doing and be able to get ideas out there that are interesting to us, ideas that we think we need additional support or information with. And so we've heard a lot of good dialogue tonight. Certainly I, for one, want to know what parents feel about the privacy policy. Yeah, I mean, legal, we need to know that, but I want to know what the parents feel about that. So I certainly, as one board member, would you know, covet that kind of input on a larger scale, so that we get the feelings and concerns of our students and parents associated with our policies. But you know, one of the ideas of this meeting is to be able to turn things around with DAC a lot faster. You know, the work session is good, and I think we'll continue to do that. But at the same time, we do that once a year. You know, and so one of the ideas is just try to, you know, a lot of good minds, a lot of good dedication, a lot of good experience on DAC. Let's utilize it, you know, to the best way possible. So that's great. I certainly second all the comments about strategic plan. And as far as your questions about the budget, the best time to insert, I would suggest that you know, attendance for our very first work session, where we start to see some of the initial information and also talk about budget guidelines. If DAC could be prepared for that meeting with some input as to maybe what priorities for spending should be, that helps us from the very beginning to start to incorporate those in the planning process. And that meeting is when, Bruce, our first budget work session? Is that December?
Let's see, do you recall when the first budget works? I'd have to look at our timeline. So I think we do it
December 9th. That's what I thought, early in December.
Holiday schedule kind of has.
Yeah, so that would be good to be able to participate in that and planning ahead, have some discussions with DAC at large about you know, items of concern and input for us as we begin to formulate and see those first numbers coming out.
Outstanding.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for
This
your first
achieved
report of the year.
Exactly what we wanted to achieve.
And
Thank you very
we'll be
much.
seeing you, and tell your kids, hey, there's the kids right out there. You can see them. Thank you very much for being here and bringing your children. It's always fun to see kids. Thanks. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public hearing, and we have no one signed up. So let us go next to board communication. Board members. Jim.
So I have been enjoying going out in the community and campaigning as hard as I can for 3A, and have had opportunity to meet with Bruce and Deirdre, and then basically all of the principals from Lafayette and Louisville in front of the city councils. It was quite a show of force at both meetings the other day. I think it went really well. A request from the Louisville mayor and pretty much I believe all of their council was they would like a work session with the school board here, and I agreed that I would carry that request forward to you. I know we have a pretty full agenda at times, but I know how much we also like meeting with the city councils, and it's possibly been a while since we've been with Louisville. So for the agenda committee, if we could please put that on for consideration in the near future.
Okay, noted. Christina. Great, okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Tina? Yeah.
So I have a couple things. I went to the delegate assembly for CASB, and I sent you all the notes from that experience. It was a great experience down in Pueblo. And just a couple of other things I would comment on. We had a good speaker, Thomas Alsbury, who talked about effective board characteristics, and I have some handouts. If you're interested, we can make copies of those. But I thought it was a pretty good table of what he saw in his vision of what a board would look like. Now, I'm newer, so I'm probably more susceptible to these than some of you, so I get that too. So, but I thought I'd hand them out to you. The other thing that I thought was kind of neat is I went to a session about the Unified Improvement Plan, and they talked about how Cherry Creek took its UIP and made it their annual school update to the community. And they actually just extracted the strategies, goals, and some of the data directly from their UIP. And I thought that was nice, that they had such strong cohesion between the UIP and their external communications to the broader community. And this is an example I took with me from that, if anyone's interested in looking at that as well. But I thought that was neat, and they certainly held that up as a best practice. Another session I went to was about data for governance, and they just had a nice list of questions about data that could be used to create policy and governance decisions. So I thought that was interesting as well, and data's a passion of mine, so it was interesting to me as also. And then I'll just comment, once we talked about park a little bit, and there was some good discussion about whether or not to support an idea of withdrawing from the park consortium. And it was just, I thought Littleton Schools was really interesting, and they talked about how really no matter what we do, we're going to end up with a test that looks like park, but we'll just pay more for the time being. And that was one of the takeaways, I think, during the delegate assembly. And I think I expanded a little bit on this on my notes. But if you have questions about what those discussions sounded like and what people said, and just talk to me, and I'll be happy to tell you, because it was all really engaging. We went 2 hours over. It was terrific. Then outside of Pueblo, I finally got up to Gold Hill and Jamestown. Those are both schools in my district. I went up last week. I picked a very good weather day, and my Prius and I made it. And I was just so impressed with the work, especially in Jamestown, just amid so much construction, how they've created such a great environment for the kids. It is just a beautiful, I mean, it's such a well-maintained facility. It really was, it struck me how nice the gym was. They even have a little gym. So that was just a wonderful opportunity for me to get up there. And that's all I've got. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks for representing us at CASB. Any, Charlie, any? No? Jenny?
So I have a question for Tina, and I'm sort of interested in the data for governance, and so I wish you'd, I mean, if you have the list of questions, I think that kind of thing would be really helpful to the agenda setting committee as we schedule. I mean, it might give us an idea about what kinds of presentations we want, because I think it's something I've struggled with since I've been a board member, is we get these huge chunks of data and what do we do with them. So I think that would be, if you would share that, I think that would be really helpful.
I would love to. That's why I kept all the handouts.
Oh, good.
And share the comments on effective board or advice for boards. I mean, I think that's a great thing to have. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Well, I'll just piggyback on what Jim said. I think that that several of us board members have been out and about in the community, you know, talking to people about 3A, and I just don't know when. And so again, I'd like to reiterate, thank you, Jim, for appearing before the City Council and taking all the principles with you. And I hear it was a really, no, but thank you. And it's really important that we get out there and do this work. And as I talk to people, I've heard more positive remarks and more positive feelings than I can recall ever hearing about a bond in my time on the board, or even before that. I think there's a lot of excitement generated, and I think a lot of it, I mean, sort of to my surprise, has to do with the fact that we're dreaming big on behalf of our kids, that we haven't been as, you know, that we've asked for what we think will make a real difference to our kids. And so anyway, I'm pumped. All you out there, watch for your ballots, and you can mark that one yes right away, and don't neglect to turn your ballots in.
Yeah, the campaign's going well. I'm feeling the same thing, and positive thoughts about the bond in particular, but also about just Boulder Valley. I mean, there's a strong feeling, so it feels very positive to me. I've spoken before a couple groups, and several of them have endorsed, and I think we're doing a great job in the campaign. So thank you to everyone here who is helping on that campaign. It's great. I think it's going well. Any other comments for board communication? Okay, the next item on our agenda then is consent grouping, and I will read them. Number 1 is personnel items. 8.2 is approval of minutes, September 23rd, 2014 regular meeting. 8.3, acceptance of donation from Creekside Elementary School. 8.4 is another donation from Creekside Elementary School. 8.5, acceptance of donation from Foothill Elementary School. 8.6, acceptance of donation from Southern Hills Middle School. 8.7, acceptance of Resolution 14-24, Family and School Partnership and Education Month. 8.8, ratification of a negotiated agreement between Boulder Valley School District and the Boulder Valley Para Educator Association. 8.9, a grant to Boulder High School for the class attendance project from the City of Boulder Excise Tax Grant. 8.10, a grant to Casey Middle School Community Learning Center from the City of Boulder Excise Tax Grant. 8.11, a grant to Whittier Elementary School, Whittier International Elementary School for Passage Works from the City of Boulder Excise Tax Grant, and a grant to Whittier International Elementary School for a writing program, also from the City of Boulder Excise Tax Grant. Do I have a motion to approve? Sam, second? Jenny? Thanks. Are there any, would anyone like to pull any items? Does anyone have any questions or comments about any of the items? Tina?
Hi, I just had a quick question about the PassageWorks program. Did that go through, and this is just a general question that I probably should have asked a long time ago, what kind of curriculum review does that go through? Because that entails professional development for teachers and is a school-wide program for social emotional development with a focus on achievement. So
I don't know the answer to that, so I'll need to find out and get it back to you.
okay, that's great. And then I'll just make a follow-up comment on that. Just one of the reasons I bring it up is it seems like we've seen one other grant. It was for the middle school level on a social emotional program, and I've seen different elementary schools adopting these programs in the last couple of years, and they're different programs at different schools, which is fine. It might be a place of innovation. One of the things, though, is it does point to me that in a period when we're instituting so many changes, we've got teacher, effectiveness and the new testing and the new math materials, and there seems to be this other need for social emotional curricula. So I just was, at some point it would be nice just to hear more about sort of the longer term vision of social emotional curricula, especially because all these elementary schools feed into a smaller number of middle schools. So I just have some curiosity about these programs, their adoption, and the curriculum review. Thank you.
Any other questions? Jenny?
And to build on that, I know there's a lot going on out in the community of Broomfield with the Broomfield Buddies that's all about social and emotional stuff. So it would be, I agree with you to hear about how this all fits in. And then can I, so I think we all ought to call out, wait, I just killed it. The resolution on Family and School Partnership and Education Month, which was something that hasn't been really discussed because it's upon us, but and Bruce, I'm going to ask you to talk about this a little bit. Do you mind talking about family and school partnership and where this resolution came from? I mean, I know we.
Sure.
I mean to distract you.
So Stacy Ziss serves on the state parent engagement network, and so she is one of our tri-chairs for the district parent council, and also serves as co-chair of the parent engagement action team for the strategic planning process. There you go. There's 3 things that Stacy does, and is an incredible parent at Centennial Middle School now, has been a parent leader for a number of years at Crestview. So as a part of the state's commitment to parent engagement, this, well, not this exact resolution, this is a subset of the exact resolution that was put forth by the state of Colorado for consideration for boards and others to embrace. So the leadership committee met and reviewed this, and we made some modification in the text and bring it forward tonight for the board's consideration. It is a strong commitment to ongoing parent engagement, And it aligns nicely with the work around the goals that you approved a year ago in June. And, our really strong parents and commitment. So if you don't know Stacy, you should. She's great. And again, just a strong parent leader. And this is a nice affirmation, not only for the work she's doing personally in the committee and the strategic planning process, but really our work throughout the state and the community. So anyway, I would appreciate your support of that resolution. Does that help, Jenny?
Yeah, I just thought, since it was a board resolution, it was worthwhile to call it out and talk about why we were, why I support it anyway, yes.
Great. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, Christina, would you please call for the vote?
Albright,
Yes.
Belleville,
Yes.
Benford, Fuqua.
Yes.
Marquis,
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Motion carries. Great, thanks. The next item on our agenda is agenda setting. Thank you, Jim. We've already heard that you have submitted a request to have a work session with the Louisville City Council. So thanks. We'll take that up. We had a long agenda setting meeting not a long one, but ours are always an hour and a half long. And we've got a lot of things coming up that are new topics to talk about. And so I think it'll be, we'll be hearing more substantive issues. So, and this discussion that we had today on the CMAS was one that we had talked about, making sure that we get this kind of information before the board and before the public, so people know what's really happening in the district. So I'm pleased with that. However, that said, I'm happy to take other suggestions or comments if anyone has anything else. Seeing none, then, great. Any other comments? Okay. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.